I'm Patti Powers. I'm an attorney advisor with Aequitas, the Prosecutors' Resource on Violence Against Women. Before coming to Aequitas, I served as a deputy prosecuting attorney for 27 years in Washington State. In my heart, I'll always be a prosecutor. The greatest experience of my career, which I truly loved and I continue to love, is the fact that I work very closely with victims of sexual assault and of domestic violence. And I was inspired and always will be inspired by the immeasurable courage of victims to help us secure justice for them and for our community. Every time I went to trial as a member of a team and had the privilege of representing and reflecting the victim's voice in that prosecution. It's an honor that I'm always going to be grateful for, and it's a passion that continues to guide and inform my efforts. SART, sexual assault response teams, and multidisciplinary teams are invaluable resources. They enable us to come together as a community. They enable us to develop the expertise of various team members and to do this work with an absolute focus on being victim-centered and serving victims. Prosecutors have a calling to bring justice to survivors and bring justice to communities. And when you think about that, there's no greater honor than to have that role of leadership in our communities. We also, as prosecutors, have an opportunity to work closely with persons who are victims of crime, who basically have had an injustice occur to them, but have somehow summoned a courage that is truly inspiring to help us do the work that we're called upon to do as prosecutors. It's an inspiration to have this chance to work with victims and to work with other experts from law enforcement, from advocacy, from the medical community, and from other members of our community. When you think about all of the opportunity that we have as prosecutors, it's no wonder that many, if not most, prosecutors are inspired by this work and by the opportunity to serve. One of the, again, a very important part of a SART is the flexibility to be available when needs arise. Prosecution needs to be trauma-informed, and that means centered absolutely upon the victim, the needs, and the best interests of the victim. The other important dimension to being a trauma-informed prosecution is developing evidence that helps describe what the victim's experience of the crime was, so that at a later point we can convey this experience, the reality of the crime, to a jury. So at different points in an investigation and after charging, and sometimes when preparing for a trial, there needs to be every effort made to make sure that we're doing this kind of work so that we can hold offenders accountable for their conduct. I think one of the most important things to consider is the commitment that different service professionals make to the SART, the Sexual Assault Response Team. A prosecutor who is on the team is committed not just to providing input about prosecution and about what evidence is necessary to convey the victim's experience to the jury, but a prosecutor is also there to listen and to learn from the expertise of other professionals. Similarly, with a law enforcement officer or a detective who's involved in a SART, that person has expertise in the investigation of a case, in speaking with witnesses and in trying to develop what the reality of that crime was for a victim. But that professional also is there to learn and there to listen to other members of the team. And we all, as members of a SART, benefit immeasurably from the input of advocates. Advocates, as we know, have expertise based upon years of work and support for victims of sexual assault. And thanks to advocates on a SART, we can all come to understand victimization in a more real and probative sense. And that, in turn, informs and helps us develop even better work for victims. So when you approach a SART with that kind of a commitment to doing your best work for the victim and also learning from other professionals, there's minimal conflict because everyone present is listening and learning as well as contributing for the very important goal of bringing justice to victims of sexual assault. Advocates, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, provide invaluable expertise in helping us to better understand victimization. There are many aspects of victimization that are important for professionals to understand. Many times victims are not able to immediately disclose what has occurred. And knowing that this is a facet of victimization, advocates can help explain that. As an example, we know that the offender caused victimization, and the offender is the cause behind any inability of a victim to disclose what has happened. An offender in causing victimization also causes trauma, and a victim's trauma is expressed in many different ways. Although no member of a SART would ask an advocate or put an advocate in the position of asking about information that is protected, an advocate can still help all of us to better understand victimization and to help inform not only our service of the victim, but also the presentation of this evidence at trial. Case reviews are important at many different points. There are times when it's necessary to convene the team to make sure that an investigation is tracking all of the evidence that needs to be discovered. One of the invaluable aspects of a SART is drawing from the expertise of many different individuals, the expertise of law enforcement professionals, prosecutors, advocates, and medical professionals who can help inform those who are involved in an investigation, for example, how to seek the best possible evidence that conveys the experience of the victim. So a case review would be an important aspect to initial work in a case. After the case is developed, and a prosecutor, for example, is learning potentially what some of the defenses in the case might be, it's again great to draw from the expertise of other professionals who can help explain from their point of view the meaning and significance of the evidence. Sometimes after a case has been concluded, it's also very good to look back at the case and to determine what was successful about the work that was undertaken and what work can be improved upon. So again, going back to the flexibility of a SART and the commitment of various professionals to do their best work for the victim, a case review can really be done whenever it's necessary and in the best interests of the work that's being accomplished. A successful case review occurs basically because of the commitment and the expertise of the members of the team. And it can't be emphasized enough that what brings members of a team together is a commitment to serve the survivor, to serve the victim. One of the aspects of determining when a case review should take place are basically what are the needs of the case. And again, bearing in mind, it isn't a case to a victim, but what are the needs that are being represented that require that kind of a response. You know, we do a lot of work with cold cases of sexual assault as well as new cases. Many times a review for cold cases will occur after there's a CODIS hit, for example. And at that point, law enforcement, prosecution, advocacy, medical professionals, and other providers who are also important to decision-making may be convened to evaluate a case that occurred many years in the past and to help inform what the best possible decision for a victim is at that point. Another important discussion that takes place in sexual assault response teams is how to make the best and most appropriate notification for a survivor who may have waited many years to hear from the criminal justice system. So there are very important decisions that'll be made at different points in the proceeding, but one of the very positive aspects of a SART, again, it goes back to the commitment that many professionals make, is to be able to be convened to make decisions and to provide feedback at all different points of a case. SARTs can also be very important to help inform or discuss a basis for charging a case. As we all know, the statutes in various jurisdictions define what the elements of the crime are, that the prosecutor has the burden or responsibility of proving beyond a reasonable doubt. What's invaluable about a SART is being able to hear the opinion and the vantage point and truly the expertise of other experts who can help inform prosecutors as to the significance of the evidence. Many times a prosecutor may have concern about being able to prove a certain element of the crime, but when you listen to experts who are able to help describe the impact of trauma on the victim and how the victim was affected by the crime, and how the victim perhaps was unable to disclose that crime, perhaps for months or maybe even for a longer period of time. But the important thing is to understand that the offender caused that delay in report. And we have this understanding or achieve this understanding through the insight and the input of professionals who help give us a little bit of a better look into how victims respond to trauma. We know that all victims respond differently, but we need to fully respect that it is the offender who caused the trauma. And this is evidence that can be presented to a jury with very successful results. Part of what we do when we present the evidence of a crime to a jury, we draw not just from physical evidence or DNA evidence, if there is DNA in a case, but we're also drawing from psychological evidence and physiological evidence. And putting this evidence together can be the work of many different professionals making their best possible decisions. So speaking with other professionals can give a prosecutor more of a global look at the potential of all of the evidence that's available to the prosecutor so that the best possible and informed charging decision can be made. It's important that the SART reflects the community. And in reflecting the community, the SART needs to bring to the table the fullest measure of diversity. And the reason for this is very clear. We need to genuinely respect and be present to cultural diversity. And drawing from the expertise of survivors, for an example, can really help better inform the efforts that we make as prosecutors. Many times after a case is concluded, prosecutors will be in contact with survivors to learn how we can do our work better, to learn what was of assistance to a survivor, and to learn for the future what we can do to improve upon our efforts. Because that's what we're all about, at serving the survivor. The survivor is doing something courageous to help us and to help us serve the community. So we need to engage in our best efforts to respect diversity in all forms and to bring diversity to the table so that all of our efforts can be enriched in a victim-centered approach. For those persons who may not trust our system or may not have reason to trust our system from their experience, a SART needs to make an answer not just in words, but in commitment, the work that is done on a day-to-day basis. And we do this in our respective professions: advocates, police officers, prosecutors, medical professionals, and many other social service providers. The commitment that we make to victims or people who seek our care needs to be first and foremost a commitment that's made based upon shared humanity. We're all in this together. We have many similar aspirations, many similar needs, but we need to recognize that beyond any boundaries or beyond any barriers, and we need to do it as individuals, as individual professionals, and then as a SART. And reality will begin to become persuasive for the future when the work that we all do coming together as a team begins to reflect change and begins to better demonstrate progress. And this will be case by case, but these cases will become more and more vocal, if not eloquent, and hopefully will allow other people to feel that the opportunity is there for them, and that we're willing and anxious to continue this process of building trust. A prosecutor's sensitivity is very important, as we all know. Many times we have the privilege of working with victims whose language we may not immediately understand. So we'll be working with interpreters. In working with interpreters, it's very important, first of all, to be guided by the expertise of the interpreter, who gives us guidance and counseling to the rate of speed that we would use, and to allow our witness, the victim, a fair opportunity to ask the question. This is an important aspect of the work that a prosecutor does, but I think the touchstone for all of this work is our shared humanity. Having the privilege, having the honor to work with the victim, and knowing that we share humanity is the touchstone for work that we do with an interpreter, for example. And when we go to court, a trial situation is very challenging for anyone, let alone a person who's suffered a serious crime. And when we have the opportunity of calling this victim for testimony in a trial, we'll be working with the interpreter to make sure that the victim's needs and emotions are truly respected at all times. We're going to want to speak as naturally as we would in this kind of a setting when we're talking. You know, that is something that is very important for a prosecutor, out of sensitivity to another human being, that we would do to try to assure the victim, our witness, that we're there for her, that nothing has changed, that our role remains the same, that the relationship that we've built throughout the prosecution remains the same. We're simply in a more formal setting. So having had that chance to work with the interpreter and be guided by the interpreter, we've learned already, and so when we're in a trial situation, we're able to continue our relationship and to speak directly to the victim, benefiting from the expertise of the interpreter. The victim's voice needs to be heard during all SART discussions. That means that the touchstone for the work that we do are the needs and rights of the victim. In order to get to that point, all involved professionals in a SART need to be guided by that same goal, by what the needs and the rights of the victim are. And when we reflect upon a victim's needs and rights, we fully know that no one except the victim truly understands what has happened and understands what her needs or his needs are. So to try to get to that point where we're doing our best possible work, we need to learn from each other on the SART team. We need to learn from the professional experience and expertise of the members of the SART. But it doesn't stop there. We need to go to the heart of our community, and we need to learn from the experience of other survivors as well as persons that they're in contact with, so that we can try to benefit from this information. We need to take on cases that may seem challenging or tough, because that's what a SART is all about. A SART is not a static process, it's a dynamic process that's living, that's breathing, and that's continually learning in an effort to do our best possible work. Our hope for SARTs and for the future of SARTs, that all of us can extend our commitment even further and even deeper, so that victims will not feel that they're underserved or not heard, but that their voices are and will remain vibrant through this process, and that on a case-by-case basis, we will be doing more and better work, taking on tough cases, meeting new challenges, and in that process, bringing the hope that is so deserved to all members of our community. And that, I think, is justice.